Facing the truth. Discovering my fiancé's deception just 2 weeks before our wedding and the consequences that follow. There is a moment in life when everything you thought you knew turns upside down. And suddenly, you are faced with a truth that cuts deeper than any knife. This story begins with the preparations for a wedding, a promise of a lifelong partnership, but it soon descends into a labyrinth of deception, trust shattered, and the painful journey of self-discovery. What would you do if, just days before the happiest moment of your life, you uncovered a secret that could ruin everything? Let me take you through one man's story, his moment of truth, his heartbreak, and ultimately, his choice to reclaim his life. The day started like any other. Mark, our protagonist, was in his backyard, tinkering with his woodworking project, lost in the focus of sanding down a piece of timber, planning to make a bookshelf for the new home he would soon share with his fiancée, Sarah. It was a rare evening at home, with Sarah in the kitchen preparing dinner. Their wedding was just 2 weeks away, and everything seemed to be falling into place. But fate, or perhaps something more insidious, had other plans for Mark. A simple impulse to take a break and grab a drink would lead him to a revelation that would alter the entire course of his life. As he walked into the kitchen, he heard Sarah on speakerphone. The voice on the other end was unmistakable. It was Marty, his brother-in-law. There was nothing strange about Sarah speaking to Marty, but there was something about the conversation that caught Mark's attention, a few subtle phrases that didn't sit right with him. Sarah was telling Marty that Evelyn, Marty's wife, should be home soon, even though Mark knew Evelyn hadn't been at their house at all that day. Mark felt an uneasy chill settle into his stomach. It wasn't just what Sarah said, but the casual ease with which she said it. He poured himself a drink, listening intently, trying to piece together what exactly was happening. When Sarah ended the call, she turned to Mark, smiling, oblivious to the small knot of suspicion that had begun to twist inside him. As the night wore on, Mark couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He played it cool, but his mind was spinning with possibilities, each one worse than the last. Was Sarah lying to protect Evelyn from Marty? Or was there something deeper? Something that could shake the foundations of their relationship? He couldn't bring himself to confront her right then. He feared her answers. Or worse, her denial. That night, while Sarah slept, Mark sat in his home office, staring at his laptop, trying to make sense of everything. He considered his options. Should he confront Sarah, demand answers, or simply walk away from it all? He was set to marry her in 2 weeks. And now he was questioning everything. The love, the trust, the future they had planned, it all hung in the balance. The next day, Mark decided to dig deeper. He felt guilty doing it, but he managed to get a hold of Sarah's phone when she wasn't looking. He scrolled through her messages, his heart pounding in his chest, each new message feeling like a potential bomb waiting to go off. He found the thread with Evelyn, and the truth started to come out. The messages were filled with hints that there was more going on behind the scenes. Sarah knew about Evelyn's infidelity. And worse, she was helping cover it up. Evelyn had been seeing someone else, sneaking around behind Marty's back, and Sarah had become complicit in the lie. Mark's heart sank as he read the messages. Not only was Sarah lying to Marty, but she was also lying to him. How could she pretend everything was fine between them while knowing about her sister's betrayal? He realized that his own relationship with Sarah was built on shaky ground, one where secrets festered beneath the surface. Mark felt a sense of betrayal, not just for Marty but for himself. He realized that he didn't really know the person he was about to marry. Over the next few days, Mark tried to keep it together. He helped Marty as best as he could, even joining him in an effort to track down Evelyn's movements. They put a GPS tracker on her car, determined to find out the truth. It felt surreal, almost like they were characters in some thriller movie. But this was Mark's real life, and it was crumbling apart before his eyes. One day, they followed Evelyn to a commercial strip mall, and sure enough, they caught her in the act, meeting with another man. Marty was devastated, and Mark found himself carrying the weight of both his own heartbreak and his brother-in-law's. Mark knew he couldn't keep up the charade any longer. The wedding was off, but he had yet to tell Sarah. When he finally gathered the courage, it was late at night. He walked into the living room, where Sarah was sitting, scrolling through her phone. He looked at her, really looked at her, and wondered how they had ended up here. He told her that he knew everything about Evelyn, About the lies, and that he couldn't marry her. Sarah was stunned. She tried to explain, tried to tell him that she was only trying to protect her sister. That it didn't have anything to do with them. But Mark couldn't see it that way. The trust had been broken, and there was no way to fix it. The next few days were a blur. Mark moved out, staying with a friend while he tried to figure out his next steps. Sarah was devastated, calling him constantly, begging him to reconsider. But Mark had made up his mind. He knew that if he stayed, he would always wonder if there were more lies, more secrets waiting to come out. He couldn't live like that. Mark also had to deal with the practicalities of calling off a wedding. There were guests to notify, vendors to cancel, money to sort out. It was exhausting, both emotionally and physically. He found himself questioning everything. Had their entire relationship been a lie? Had he missed the signs all along? Blinded by love and the hope of a future together? In the midst of the chaos, Mark found moments of clarity. He realized that the betrayal he felt wasn't just about the lies. It was about the loss of the future he had envisioned for himself. He had imagined a life with Sarah, a family, a home filled with love and laughter. Now, all of that was gone, replaced by uncertainty and a sense of loss that seemed to permeate every aspect of his life. But as the days turned into weeks, Mark began to see things differently. He realized that this was an opportunity for him to start over, to build a life that was truly his own. He had been so focused on the idea of getting married, of starting a family, that he had lost sight of himself. Now, he had a chance to rediscover who he was, to figure out what he really wanted out of life. Mark started to reconnect with old friends, people he had lost touch with during his relationship with Sarah. He threw himself into his work, taking on new projects that challenged him and gave him a sense of purpose. He even started going to therapy, something he had never considered before, but which helped him process the pain and betrayal he had experienced. One day, while out for a walk, Mark ran into an old friend from college. They got to talking, and she invited him to a small get-together she was hosting. Mark was hesitant at first, but he decided to go. That night, surrounded by people who cared about him, who wanted to see him happy, Mark realized that he was going to be okay. He wasn't defined by his failed relationship, by the lies or the betrayal. He was his own person, and he had the power to create a new future for himself. Mark's story is one of heartbreak, but it's also one of hope and resilience. It's a reminder that sometimes, the people we trust the most can let us down, but that doesn't mean we are broken beyond repair. Trust is fragile, and once it's shattered, it can be incredibly difficult to rebuild. But what Mark learned is that, ultimately, we have to trust ourselves first. We have to be willing to walk away from situations that don't serve us. Even when it's painful, even when it feels like our entire world is falling apart. There's a saying that goes, when one door closes, another one opens. For Mark, the door that closed was the life he had planned with Sarah. But the door that opened was a new beginning, a chance to redefine himself and create a future that was truly his own. It wasn't easy, and there were days when he wanted nothing more than to go back to the way things were. But in the end, Mark chose himself. He chose to believe that he deserved better, that he deserved honesty and love without conditions. To anyone who finds themselves in a similar situation, remember this: it's okay to walk away. It's okay to choose yourself. Even when it feels selfish or wrong, you deserve to be happy. To be in a relationship where there are no secrets, no lies, and if you find yourself facing the end of something you thought would last forever, know that it's not the end of you. It's just the beginning of something new. Mark's journey was not what he had planned, but it was exactly what he needed. He found strength in his vulnerability, courage in his pain, and hope in the uncertainty of what lay ahead. And in the end, that's what life is all about, finding the light, even in the darkest of times, and trusting that better days are ahead. My wife did not have S*X with me for years when I was depressed. I ate up for considering leaving her now that I'm back to normal? In a world that seems ever so fixated on the ideal of soulmates, where love is depicted as flawless and undying, what happens when the fairy tale shatters? What if the person you once thought of as your everything breaks the promises that held you together? And then, what if someone unexpected, someone entirely different from your dreams, finds a way to heal the shattered pieces of your heart? This is the story of Jay and his wife. A story that questions traditional ideas of love and explores how sometimes the truest kind of love is born not out of perfection, but through the storms we weather together. Our story begins with Dave, the boy next door who seemed destined to live happily ever after with his childhood sweetheart. Dave and the narrator were inseparable since they were kids, their bond growing stronger over time. They were the picture-perfect couple, the kind that made people believe in love at first sight and meant to be. Their lives mirrored every romantic movie ever made. They laughed, they danced, they talked for hours about their dreams. And eventually, they married right after high school. Everything seemed to be a fairy tale until one day, that dream shattered. The couple had planned their future together, imagining the children they would have and even naming them before they were born. But in their 7th year of marriage, the narrator walked into her bedroom, only to find Dave in bed with another woman. The illusion of the perfect soulmate vanished before her eyes. The betrayal hit hard, as if she had walked into a nightmare, a harsh reminder that even the most romantic stories can have dark twists. The betrayal wasn't just an act against their marriage, it tore apart everything the narrator believed about love. The pain was unbearable. She spiraled into a deep depression, trying to piece herself together with the help of friends, family, and therapy. For years, she lived like a ghost of herself, haunted by memories of the love she lost and unable to find joy in the present. It was her friends who urged her to try dating again. The narrator reluctantly agreed, but every man she met was a poor substitute for the boy who had once been her entire world. No one could make her laugh the way Dave did, and no one seemed to fit the mold of the ideal partner she had envisioned. That was, until she met Jay. Jay was different. He wasn't the Prince Charming she was used to, in fact. On their first date, he barely spoke. He wasn't funny or outgoing like Dave. Instead, he was quiet, stoic, and kept his emotions close to his chest. He didn't even seem particularly interested in her. Their first few dates were awkward and far from romantic. The narrator was sure that she wouldn't see him again after their first meeting. But, to her surprise, Jay called her for a second date. Her friends convinced her to give him another chance. And slowly, a connection began to grow. Jay wasn't the kind of man who swept her off her feet. He didn't make grand gestures or declare his undying love. Instead, he showed up. He paid attention to the little things she said, remembered her favorite foods, and showed care in ways that Dave never had. One night, after they had just begun seeing each other, the narrator asked Jay if she could make a snack from his pantry after they had slept together. Instead of letting her rummage around, Jay went out and came back with her favorite takeout dish, something she had mentioned in passing during a previous date. It was in these small moments that the narrator began to realize that love isn't always about fireworks. Sometimes, love is quiet, gentle, and steady. Jay had his own demons to fight. He came from a troubled background, with parents who were addicted to drugs and a childhood filled with instability and hardship. Jay grew up mostly with his grandfather, who taught him resilience and the importance of hard work. His parents' neglect left Jay with scars that made it difficult for him to express his emotions. He grew up believing that love was something other people experienced, never him. His only examples of relationships were filled with fights, cheating, and chaos. It was the kindness of a couple that Jay tutored as a teenager that gave him hope that one day he, too, could find a family filled with love and stability. When Jay met the narrator, he was hesitant to get close. He had learned early on that vulnerability was dangerous. He kept his emotions guarded, afraid that if he let them show, they would only lead to more pain. The narrator, too, had her walls up. After being betrayed by Dave, she wasn't ready to open herself up to the possibility of being hurt again. And yet, something about Jay's steadiness, his quiet support, and his actions began to break down her defenses. Slowly, they began to build a relationship based not on the flashy promises of romance, but on the steady reliability of two people who wanted to be there for each other. For the first several years of their relationship, Jay rarely said, "I love you." He was a man of few words, and he had never grown up with parents who told him they loved him. To him, love was an action, something you showed, not something you said. The narrator, on the other hand, wanted to hear those words. In her first marriage, she and Dave had often declared their love for each other. But now, the words seemed foreign to her. Even though Jay didn't say it, he showed his love in every way. He was there for her during her darkest moments, arranged therapy for her to help her cope with her trauma, and supported her through every up and down. He held her when she cried, cooked her favorite meals, and did the chores without her asking. Years went by, and their relationship grew stronger. They got married, had children, and created a life that neither of them had thought possible. Jay was there for every moment. He was there when their daughter was born. And he held her in his arms and promised to protect her. He was there for every scraped knee, every sleepless night, and every bedtime story. He never missed an opportunity to be there for his family. To Jay, action spoke louder than words. And every action he took showed just how much he loved his wife and children. But the narrator wanted to hear the words. It wasn't that she doubted Jay's love, she knew, deep down, that he loved her, but there was something about hearing it, about knowing that he could say it, that made her feel closer to him. One day, she decided to tell him how she felt. She stood in front of him as he read a book and said, "I love you." Jay looked up, confused, not sure how to respond. He had never been good with words, and the sudden declaration caught him off guard. He mumbled an, "Okay," and the narrator felt her heart sink. She worried that maybe he didn't love her the way she thought he did. That night, Jay came to her as she lay in bed. He apologized for his earlier response, telling her that he had been caught off guard. He told her that he loved her, that not a day went by where he didn't feel grateful to have her in his life. He explained that he hadn't grown up hearing those words, so they felt foreign to him. But that didn't mean he didn't feel them. The narrator was moved to tears, realizing that Jay's love was deeper than she had ever imagined. From that moment on, they made an effort to say, "I love you," more often. And it brought them closer together. With the encouragement of Reddit users and articles on PTSD and childhood trauma, Jay began attending therapy to confront his past. He had spent his entire life burying his emotions, trying to be strong and stoic because that was what he thought he needed to do. But therapy helped him understand that vulnerability wasn't a weakness. It was okay to feel. And it was okay to show those feelings to the people he loved. One evening, Jay came home from work, hugged his wife tightly, and broke down. He told her that he was sorry for being so closed off all these years, that he had been afraid to face his past. He told her that he loved her, that she had made his life something worth living, and that he wanted to make up for all the years he hadn't expressed his love. The narrator and Jay found a new level of intimacy in their relationship. They began to talk more openly about their feelings, their hopes, and their fears. They made time for each other, went on dates, and planned a trip for just the two of them. Jay became more affectionate, not just with his wife but with their children as well. He told his kids he loved them, something he had never heard from his own parents. Their son was confused, but their daughter smiled and called him weird. For Jay, hearing those words from his children was healing. He was breaking the cycle of pain and neglect that he had experienced growing up. And he was creating a family filled with love and understanding. The story of Jay and his wife teaches us that love isn't always about grand gestures or romantic fairy tales. True love is found in the everyday actions that show you care. It's in the way someone listens to you, remembers the little things, and stands by your side during your darkest moments. It's about being vulnerable and opening yourself up to the possibility of being hurt because that's the only way to truly connect with another person. Sometimes, the person you end up loving isn't the one you imagined. They might not be the charming, funny, outgoing partner you always dreamed of. Instead, they might be quiet, reserved, and unsure of how to express their feelings. But that doesn't mean their love is any less real. In fact, it might be even more meaningful because it's built on resilience, understanding, and a willingness to grow together. Jay's story also reminds us of the importance of confronting our past. It's easy to bury our pain and pretend it doesn't exist. But true healing comes from facing our demons head-on. Therapy isn't a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength. It's a way to break free from the patterns that hold us back and to create a better life for ourselves and the people we love. In the end, love isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, even when it's hard. It's about choosing each other every single day, even when the road gets tough. And it's about knowing that, no matter what, you have someone by your side who loves you, not just in words, but in actions. Jay and his wife found a love that was deeper and more real than any fairy tale. And that's the kind of love worth fighting for.